More than 10 months after ethnic strife erupted in Manipur, dividing the Kukis from the Meitei community, the Manipur High Court has reviewed and changed one of its earlier critical orders. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. For those of us who remember how the strife started, what was the lead up to it in Manipur, it takes you all the way back to the month of March when the Manipur High Court held that tribal status could be granted to the Meitei community. The Kuki community objected, and the rest, as they say, is history. There are multiple reasons for why the violence, the ethnic strife erupted in Manipur, but the Manipur High Court order is seen to be a trigger point, a catalyst of sorts. Now we have an extremely important review coming from the Manipur High Court. The Manipur High Court has, in the last few hours, reviewed its own order and has asked for the deletion of a paragraph that spoke about expedited tribal status to the people of the Meitei community. To talk about the implications of this order and whether it might finally restore some sort of fragile peace between the Kuki and the Meitei community. Remember, it's been more than 10 months since there's been a kind of de facto barrier, a kind of de facto wall between the people of the hill areas and the people in the valley. Could the review of this order change any of that? Let's introduce our panel today as we look at this all important decision that has come from the Manipur High Court. Joining us on the program today is Colonel Chaturvedi. Colonel Chaturvedi, of course, is somebody who has been a former commandant in the Assam Rifles. It's also his birthday today, so many happy returns, sir. And let's hope that your
Thank
birthday
you.
marks the beginning of a new peace for the fragile state of Manipur. Thank you for spending your birthday evening with us. Also joining us is Rami Desai. She's, of course, an author, but also an expert of the northeastern part of our country. Thank you, Rami. Always a pleasure to have you with us. Also joining us on the program is Dr. Tombing. Let's bring him up in the screen. Dr. Tombing is a professor at the National Law University in Assam. Welcome to the program. And also joining us is Mr. Luwang. Mr. Luwang is a lawyer. And he's also been involved in the case, in the petitions that the Meitei groups have taken to the Supreme Court. So thank you very much, Mr. Luwang, for your time on the program today. Let me actually start with you, Mr. Luwang. What is the significance of this order, and will the Meitei groups be disappointed with this? Because if you remember, when the Manipur High Court had recommended this in March of 2023, the Supreme Court even at that time had questioned its right and its jurisdiction to do so, to alter the names of communities on the tribal list. So there was always going to be a legal problem. Now that the Manipur High Court has reviewed its own order, how do you respond to it, both as a lawyer, and how do you think the popular response on the street might be?
Barkha, I don't think that neither the order of the March 26, 27, sorry, no latest order on review really matters on ground as well as legally speaking. One, because the legal position has always been very, very clear that under Article 341 and 342 of the Indian Constitution, it's absolute presidential and executive discretion to include a particular tribe or a community within the SC list or otherwise. So we know it very, very well that the order of March 27 is not constitutionally sustainable. The same has been pointed out by no less than the Chief Justice of India in open court in the Supreme Court. We know it very, very well. I don't think that this particular order, even the order of March 27, is going to deter the Meiteis from demanding the several tribe status.
So let me understand what you're saying. You're saying that you are not surprised in a way by what the Manipur High Court has done. It was always legally on the cards, and it is not going to change the demand by Meiteis for tribal status, but the route taken for that demand will be different. Am I summarizing you accurately, Mr.
Yeah,
Luwang?
Barkha, you are right. That's exactly the point I'm making. That there's never been an important issue for us. I mean, legally, we know it very, very well. I mean, as a lawyer, as a community member, that is not the right route. I mean, we know it very well. The Meitei struggle to get the ST tag will continue no, on the routes which are provided by under the Indian Constitution. We know it very, very well. We have to first get a recommendation to the state government, then it goes to the Registrar General, then it goes to the center, then it comes back to the tribal ministry, and then a National Commission for Scheduled Tribe, then so on and so forth, cabinet and then parliament. So the struggle for the scheduled tribe status for the Meiteis will continue. And but I want just to make a small rectification of what you said initially. The crisis which is continuing, since May 3, 2023 till now, I don't think that it has got a lot to do with Meitei's demand for ST. It's basically a pent-up anger uh, relating to a lot of issues between the Kuki
Mhm.
tribe and the Meiteis. Maybe the tribals' insecurity about their land possession, and their misconception about the the ongoing or the increasing effort by the government of Manipur to throw out illegal encroaches from the forest, and also some kind of a war on drugs. Somehow these movements have been, or these measures have been misconstrued by the communities as one community targeted. So that I think is the main important reason for the ongoing issue between the two communities, Meitei. Of course, the AC demand tech could be a facade for the ongoing crisis, but I don't think it's the only reason why the crisis has engulfed
Okay.
Manipur. Even though the Home Minister have said during his last visit in Manipur that the order of March 27 could be a reason for the crisis, but I don't subscribe to that viewpoint.
Okay. So, two
Yeah,
important points by you. One, you say that the Meitei people will not be giving up their demand for tribal status. That is not changing politically. But it will
yeah,
have to be a political demand, not a legal demand. You recognize as a lawyer that legally the court can't mandate that. And
yeah.
two, you disagree. You disagree with the analysis that this court order was the trigger for what started in the month of May and has never really settled down since then. Dr. Tomming, how do you respond? There are people who thought that perhaps this is a way that would clear the pathway for reconciliation between the two communities. Mr. Luwang says neither is this the cause of the rupture, nor is it going to be the solution. How do you see it, Dr. Tombik?
I agree partly with Mr. Luwang because from the time when the skirmishes started happening also, and then when this volatile situation turned into some kind of an epochal mayhem, the ST demand and then the High Court order is uh, is maybe one small aspects of the larger factors maybe.
Mhm.
And then he's also correct in many ways that there is some concern with regard to eviction and the government policies, etc., etc. But then from there, I would differ on certain concerns and consideration for the reason that there is maybe insecurity on both the sides, maybe because we know different communities are boxed into the valley area, and it is a pertinent lifeline and opportunity for job and better lives for all the inhabitants of Manipur. And in fact, that kind of a scenario whereby different communities are staying together, uh, and in this context of the violence escalation, I realize even more that how important state is. In fact, if the state would have been more of a parent and taking care of maybe these contesting claims of maybe the tribe and then the Meitei community, and not allow a kind of a sectarian politics, which might have been brewing on for quite some time, and maybe some kind of a radicalization, and then some kind of targeting the idea of the others. Had that particular concern already being raised at the media and also other print media and etc., etc., and those propagation, had it been curtailed, and also maybe narratives of the idea of being a domicile of Manipur and who are dependent on one another, if this could have been established, the state would not have,
Within
being
this
in.
situation. So
Yeah,
both of you make the point, and that is unfortunate for those who may have hoped for a new beginning after this order, that the order is a very small part, both of the cause and the pathway to solutions. I think you may have differing reasons for it, but you both come to the same conclusion. Rami, how do you see it? The point is that we are now 10 months on, and while thankfully we have not seen fresh, consistent outbursts of violence, we have not seen peace, and we have certainly not seen reconciliation. We have seen a kind of de facto barrier that continues to exist between, not just geographically, but also socially, between the Kuki and the Meitei people. And we have seen institutions called into question, their authorities called into question. There have been reports of the Arambai Tengol instructing MLAs. There have been attacks on and criticisms of the Assam Rifles, senior soldier of which is here. All kinds of classic institutions of authority, be it political or military, have been undermined. And both Luwang and Tombing seem to agree that there is no pathway in sight for reconciliation. How do you see the court developments?
Barkha, first of all, I think it's wonderful that you are following this story, because just the way people of different viewpoints can come on your show and have a civil conversation and yet go back with different viewpoints is a very good example of how dialogue can happen. And, this is what has been the need of the hour in Manipur for a really long time. Unfortunately, many of these instances where initiatives have been taken have failed because of the vested interests. Having said that, let me come to the High Court order. Of course, both Mr. Tombing and Mr. Luwang, have really sort of put it well, because I have to agree with that, this is not going to change anything. It's only the point 3 of section 17 that has been deleted of that order, which has been struck off, meaning, and this is my translation of it, meaning that the state government is now under no obligation to send the recommendation within 2 weeks, as it was stipulated, or 1 year, which was later amended by the central government. So now there is no time constraint. And of course, the original position of exercising discretion to send the recommendation for the inclusion still remains. And the government still needs to reply. But like Mr. Luwang pointed out, that the High Court anyway, it's anyway not the route to get scheduled tribe status. That is a very long drawn process. You go to the NCST, you go to the RGI, you go to the Tribal Institute, TRI, it goes to the Parliament, you go to the President. And, there are different levels of veracity that is needed for the claim. After that also that can be contested. If you remember the Banjara's inclusion almost 20 years ago, and it's been contested since then. But on the other hand, Barkha, whatever the stipulated criteria are of who is a scheduled tribe, who isn't a scheduled tribe, that also, as and when needed, has been widened, the description, whenever needed, like in the case of the Hattis. So, these are all very complex situations. And of course, the tribals and at this point, the non-tribals, both of them know what the processes are. Therefore, they know that this judgment or this exclusion of this point 3 doesn't really mean anything in the longer run. What we need in the longer run, Barkha, and we've discussed this before, you've been on ground zero, I've been on ground zero. The one thing I remember agreeing on is that, that there's a complete trust deficit. And like you mentioned, it's not just within communities, but, within the administrative system, within the government, towards the forces. And I think there needs to be a very determined effort that needs to be made, to have multi-levels of dialogue. There needs to be disarmament. We have some, very important occasions coming up. We have the Sioux renewal coming up. One needs to tread that very sensitively, very carefully, because, it's bound to upset one or another. We've already seen protests, calm protests though, coming up in Manipur as the Sioux agreement renewal comes close. So every step the government takes at this point is going to have to be measured. there has to be immense restraint showed by not just the common people, but organizations, Arambai Bengal, whether it's that or whether it's ITLF, we saw what happened in Churchandpur, but, eventually people need to realize that, any sort of continuation of this is pointless because it's affecting them. Also, my last point, Barkha, the right to demand cannot be taken away. Now somebody can demand, you can take the legal course, you can, object to it, you can counter it, but that is a constitutional right to be able to demand as long as it's done with peace. So I don't believe this was the trigger for the situation. It's a multi-layered problem and it needs a multi-layered solution.
Let's pick up your last point. The right to demand cannot be taken away, and you're absolutely right. Whether it's farmers, you agree or disagree with their right, as long as it's peaceful protest within the framework of the constitution, that right exists. Or it's the Kukis saying, give us a separate administration, or it's the Meiteis saying, give us a tribal status. You're absolutely right. And I think all three of you have thus far made the point that the court order is nearly inconsequential. To that extent, it's a technicality that doesn't get to the heart of the matter. But then what next, Colonel Chaturvedi? Because it has been more than 10 months. The story has fallen off the headlines. People have forgotten, Manipuris have not forgotten Manipur, but the media has, by and large, with notable exceptions, in not been paying attention to Manipur. But for the people who led integrated lives, I'm not saying there were no disagreements between the two communities, but you didn't have this kind of division that you have today. You didn't have the kind of undermining, what Rami calls the trust deficit, undermining of the military, undermining of the state police, both areas, the Meiteis refusing to place their trust in the army, in the Assam rifles, the Kukis refusing to place their trust in the Manipur police, right? On both sides of the divide, women have been placed at the front line, so the hands of soldiers are in any case doubly tied. This is a very complicated situation, and how much longer can it go on? Colonel Chaturvedi, what do you make of what's happened in the court?
Ma'am, firstly, I would also like to compliment you that you have been so diligently pursuing this cause. And I wish to bring about that not only now, even in the Second World War, this place was known as the Forgotten Frontier. I mean, Field Marshal Smith has written a book on the famous 14th Army, which is called the Forgotten Army. And so it's a yeoman's job which you have done so far, and I've been following you. And but my view, as always, will be a military point of view. It's a military point of view. If you think all military men are at all levels, they are trained to think in steps. So I think the removal of this order by the High Court is a step. I won't say it is important. I won't comment on it. I won't say, because there are people who are more conversant with it than me presently. But I think it's a step in the right direction. And that's how things start moving in the right direction. And coming on to, there would be more steps coming. And I'm sure that the Kukis have the demand of a hill council. The Nagas, the Manipuri Nagas have a long-standing demand of a hill council in their areas. They feel neglected. But I think this is all, this violence and the breakdown of trust which has taken place. It's not a one-day affair. It's decades of neglect and decades of I must say breakdown of trust between both ends. If I may respectfully bring out that Nagas have done this economic blockade against the Meiteis 10 years ago in 2009, and I was at the thick of it, and I used to think, what's happening? All hell got lows. And then the Meiteis. So at some stage, they also had to do something about this thing. They are human beings now. Now imagine a child who was 5 years old then, who would have perhaps felt the hunger pangs of his own and his mother and father, or maybe he would have lost someone because of that, because of the economic block, would be a 25-year-old adult now. He would have he would have forgiven it, but he will never forget it. So, it's the building up of trust, conflict. It is, I think, a conflict resolution stage which is going on. We have, so it's a good step. It's the first step in the resolution stage, but there are many more steps which have to come in to regain the trust of our beloved Manipuri people, the conglomerate of all the tribes and Meiteis as well.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. You and I both saw this as one step in conflict resolution, but our friends from Manipur and even Rami see it as almost inconsequential. So let me take it. Let me take this back to Mr. Luwang. Mr. Luwang, you see the order as a mere technicality. You see, as a lawyer, you were always aware that the court was not going to provide this pathway to tribal status. But do you see this as one step in conflict resolution, or do you see it as irrelevant entirely?
Well, Barkha, so long as the Meiteis demand ST tech for themselves, I think the issue could continue. It's about, as Rami said, that there cannot be any stoppage on our the Meiteis demand for ST. It's a constitutional right, whether it is granted or otherwise. It's a complete and absolute, executive prerogative. This is one issue which will be there for some time. And but as I said, this I don't think was the reason for the present crisis. The reasons are varied. Rami has mentioned it, and other speakers also have mentioned it, and I agree with them. This will continue, and I don't think it's even one step forward. That taking out that particular paragraph from the March 27 order, I don't think so. The solution, according to me, lies in dispelling some of the misconceptions which our Kuki brothers have, like say the separate administration demand. See, Barkha, as a previous speaker have said about the separate councils for the tribals. See, one big misconception amongst the Kuki community is that they already have a separate administration. They have an autonomous council in hills, not only for the Nagas but also for the Kukis. Under the sixth schedule of the Indian Constitution, they can make laws, they can set up schools, they can regulate themselves, the rivers, streams. They can collect taxes. They can even impose fines, taxes, and collect money. They have a separate account for themselves. There is a separate fund created for the council. So this is one misconception which needs to be dispelled, and they need to understand that they already have a separate administration under the Indian Constitution, and what they are demanding now is a little different from what the Constitution contemplates. Basically, it's not a demand for separate administration, it's a demand for a separate state or a separate union territory, which could be a problem in conflict resolution.
So basically, we're stuck then we're back to square one, Dr. Tombing. We've heard a very clear perspective that the Meitei community will not give up its political right to demand tribal status. How do you think the Kuki community respond to this order? Obviously, they would support it. It's Kuki groups that went to the Supreme Court against the earlier order of the Manipur High Court. But do you also believe it will make no real difference on the ground? Dr. Tombing? Dr. Rami, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I have my reservations for varied reasons. And one thing I found quite illustrative was what Colonel Saab said. A child who was 5 years old, who will be 25 years of like 20 odd years or 10 odd years and all that. I see this particular problem as an emancipation of coming of age of certain tribal communities with regard to maybe being aware of their rights and then maybe their constitutional rights to an extent. But it might have been nuanced because the growth of legal system and legal accountability has been very far-fetched in this region. And that kind of a gap of legal science and then the growth of legal accountability might have in one way created an idea of demographic immunity to legal accountability. And therefore, there is a huge gap between what a tribe person would perceive as accountability and what actually is the law. So even if you imagine that there is a demographic immunity, technically the law is there, but then it is not felt. And what I see now is that what Advocate Luwang has said, the insecurity part, in fact, maybe the idea of republic in the context of the majority will have their way, but the minority will have their say. This is starkly missing in this Manipur context, because we briefly mentioned the Naga concern also. We briefly mentioned the Kukis concern as well. Now, what is happening is it's a demand from the three communities, which is an exclusive demand, an isolated demand, an abstracted demand, and this has maybe created an idea of one, the elder one, let's say the majority being more elder, let's say in some presumption, maybe because of insecurity, said or unsaid or implied, maybe
Okay.
think that if I assert everything, then I secure my future. Another one is that they see this assumption, the younger ones, let's say the minority, maybe seeing it as maybe an idea of usurping, now maybe demanding partition from the state, which may be in some kind of an allegory, parallel may be drawn with state as a parent. And that is where that conflicting claim has come. And yet the war has made it very hard to now negotiate also, because the sentiment, the emotions, everything got connected.
So yeah, you've given a historical sort of account there, a of age of tribal communities. Rami, I want to bring you in. Like, I was just, my producer just shared some facts that the inclusion of Meiteis in the ST list was rejected as far back as 1982. So this is not a demand that has started with this conflict. This has happened before. And of course, as you said, the right to demand cannot be taken away from any Indian as long as it's within the framework of the law and the constitution. My question to you is, to both you and the Colonel in closing comments, is look ahead. What next? If this order is just one step or no step, what now? It's been more than 10 months.
Barkha, you're quite right. It's been very long, but, history also tells us that I remember when the Kuki Naga clashes happened, it took many, many years for it to come, almost over 5 or 6 years for it to come to some amount of peace and conclusion. These are very sensitive communities. They're very high strung on identity, and of course, like Mr. Toming very eloquently spoke about the history, but history also, these identities have been forged very later in the history of India. It was the British who brought it into the census. There wasn't sort of separate communities called tribals before that, but now I would say this in a different way to Mr. Toming, that yes, it's coming of age because people are trying to assert that identity. And I think that has caused certain fault lines which needn't actually be there. I also think we need to really underscore the fact that a lot of these states, Barkha, because it has been in a state of conflict post-independence, most of these states, if you look at Nagaland, if you look at Mizoram, if you look at Manipur, they've been in a state of conflict. There is this economy that has sort of cropped up, which is behind the shadows. It's this underground economy, which is related to drugs, which is related to corruption. A lot of these privileges that a lot of these states have, whether it's the autonomous councils, also, have a problem of implementation. So we need to address better implementation. We need to address grievances on both sides. And I think those grievances need to be addressed by themselves, not what the other person is getting or not getting, but what is it that would make life better for yourself, so it needs to be detangled from each other, and grievances should be put aside, and based on that, negotiation should happen, not what you can have or not have. The other thing is, Barkha, that historically mistakes have been made by arming civilians, for whatever reason that there may be. And I think this disarmament is very important, because we're talking about kids who are coming of age, from 20 years ago, but kids are seeing this conflict also. So when is this cycle going to end? And I think that is never going to happen, Barkha, if we leave it on the government to say, oh, bring all the weapons back. Because it is also a fact that now there are things like RPG mortars that are being made at home, because, it's so easy to access how to make how to make arms and ammunition on the website.
So if the government doesn't bring the weapons back, who does?
See, the government can ask. The government can have combing operations. Combing operations, as we've seen in Moray, have been difficult because it's, within such heavily, densely populated areas. But I think civil organizations, leaderships, elders of these communities need to really put a call out, a strong call out saying no more. We cannot have our children holding arms and weapons when they should be in schools. And, all these communities, all tribal communities, one of the things that you look up to them for is the kind of respect that they have for authority, they have for their own leadership, they have for their elders, and this is the time that they really need to step up.
Absolutely. I think, one thing that really stayed with me from my reporting trip to Manipur was, as I said, school-going children being weaponized. I mean, they actually have weapons. They know how to assemble them. They know how to make them. These are images, of course, of someone who lost a loved one. But those was one of the school-going men. And ironically, Rami, he said he had wanted to join the army. And in both communities, we found young civilians, school-going civilians armed. Last word to you, Colonel Chaturvedi. You, of all people in this panel, think of this as maybe a small step, but one step of conflict resolution. I'm struck by what Rami said, that you cannot by force disarm civilians. Many of these are villages, these are farmers, these are children with weapons, they're women at the front line of all of these conflicts. So by diktat, perhaps disarming is not possible. It's too late now. Then what is the way forward? Last word to you. You said it's one step. There are many other steps. What are some of those other steps?
Ma'am, step one should be, I feel that historically, we have a huge gap between the front-end leadership who are front-ending the whole show and the top leadership. This leadership has to coincide and inputs have to be expected, howsoever bad or unpalatable they might seem, to everyone all around. If the children are being weaponized, we have to accept it. They are being done, and we have to counter it. Then, army solution should always be the last solution, ma'am. Because if the army does combing operations, then, ma'am, the nature of the job is that there will be collaterals. I mean, there are collateral damages, and you can't deny it. I mean, if the soldier is trained in a manner that you fire on me, I'm going to fire back. I mean, I don't care.
Yeah.
Fire is coming, khatam. So, there has to be a via media to this. The tribal leaders, and most importantly, there are a large number of missionaries and even Hindu Meitei leaders, who would be in ISKCON and all. They can play a major part in getting everyone on board. I'm not talking about playing the religion card, but they play a very important part in the lives of Kukis and Nagas and all the tribals. I've been there, and I used to go to churches myself on Sundays. I mean, so we have to get around the tribal leaders, the Kulakpas and the Nagas, and the Kuki leaders. Kulakpas are leaders of a group of large number of villages, and the only answer to this is that everybody has to first understand that we have to end violence, and enough is enough. Only then will this thing move forward. Military can be in place to put the rules in place after the police, and then if military when it is unleashed, there would be collaterals, there would be firings and all at times. I mean, despite all the restraint we do, but nobody, I mean, I don't go to Manipur to die. I mean, as simple as that. Similarly, the Manipuris also don't want to die. I mean, so when we understand this, we should come together and sort. Secondly, one very important point I want to bring out, ma'am, I had always felt when I was there leading a battalion and all, there is too much of time taken, in negotiations and everything. The tribal leaders, what I have found is they're very excited when they come to meet you. They have hope, as a military leader, as a government machinery, they come with all hopes. But we tell them, okay, we're going to do this, khatak, khatak. Suddenly after that, 6 months is dragging on.
Nothing
and
happens,
on and on. Yeah, so we need to hasten it all up.
I think just on the last point, I'll just close with just a small thought of my own. The fact that we're in the 11th month of this, and thankfully things are quieter, but we can't say they're normal. And I think the one thing perhaps that the four of us or the four of you have brought home is that the solution is going to have to come partly from within the communities, by diktat, by government, by force, by policy, by courts. Can only go so far and no further. And even disarming, I think that's a very important point that both Colonel Chaturvedi and Rami have made. you need civil society leaders now perhaps to lead this, religious leaders, social leaders. But we leave it there. The court headline bringing Manipur briefly back to national attention. But we hope that much more is happening behind the scenes. There's complex history here. Trust doesn't get broken overnight, but repairing it takes even longer. Thank you very much to Dr. Tombing, to Mr. Luwang, to Rami Desai, to Colonel Chaturvedi, and to our audience. Thank you for watching. Take care. Mojo Story has always made a commitment to its viewers to go to where the story is. And as you can see here, we are at the epicenter of the Israel war on Gaza. We are right at the front line, about 1 mile from the Gaza Strip, as the Israeli military gets ready with its tanks and its gunners to begin its final frontal assault that will take troops into Gaza. As we said, we are not like other organizations. We believe in giving you all sides of the story objectively and as much as possible from the ground. And that's exactly what we're doing here, covering the biggest global story today from the epicenter of the war zone. So please, we need your support. Support us, become a Mojo member, subscribe to us, spread the word, and thank you for your support.